Excuse me, could my daughter get some water, please? The flight attendant, Jennifer Walsh, looks directly at Benjamin Cole, then turns away without a word. She walks past his 8-year-old daughter, Maya, who has been sitting quietly in seat 12F for over an hour, visibly thirsty. "Orange juice for you, sir?" Jennifer cheerfully asks the white businessman in 12E, right next to them. She hands him a crystal glass and warm towel with a practiced smile. Benjamin raises his hand again. "Miss, we've been waiting." Jennifer's eyes pass right through him like he's made of air. She continues serving everyone else in the business class cabin, everyone except the black father and his little girl. Maya tugs her father's sleeve, confused. "Daddy, why won't the nice lady help us?" The answer would soon shock the entire airline industry. Have you ever been treated like you were completely invisible, only to discover the person ignoring you had made the biggest mistake of their career? 2 hours earlier, Terminal B bustled with typical Thursday morning energy. Benjamin Cole moved through the crowds with purposeful steps, his posture straight and confident. The way he navigated the airport showed familiarity, checking departure boards with quick glances, automatically noting emergency exits, his eyes scanning crowds with trained awareness. Maya skipped beside him, her backpack decorated with airplane stickers bouncing with each step. "Daddy, will Grandma remember the stories about your flying adventures?" "She remembers everything, sweetheart." Benjamin's voice carried warmth mixed with something harder to define, the measured tone of someone accustomed to command. At the gate, Benjamin reviewed their boarding passes one final time. Flight 892, seats 12F and 12E, business class tickets he'd carefully saved for months to afford. This wasn't just any trip. Tomorrow he would start his new position as Director of Aviation Safety Consulting in Washington, D.C., a role that would use decades of specialized experience he rarely discussed. The boarding area filled with the usual mix of business travelers. Expensive suits, designer luggage, and the confident chatter of people accustomed to premium service. Benjamin and Maya were the only black passengers visible in the business class boarding line. Maya pulled out her worn copy of Famous Pilots in History, pages soft from countless readings. "Daddy, did you know Bessie Coleman was the first African-American pilot?" "I did know that." Benjamin smiled, remembering his own first aviation heroes. "She had to go to France to learn because no American school would teach her." The leather briefcase beside Benjamin contained more than work documents. Inside lay commendation letters, flight certificates, and a folder marked with Pentagon classification stamps. His vintage Omega Speedmaster, standard issue for test pilots, had survived missions he never spoke about, even to Maya. Jennifer Walsh, the chief flight attendant, prepared for another routine shift. At 42, she'd worked this route for 8 years, serving celebrities, politicians, and corporate executives. Her smile came easily for passengers who fit her expectations of business-class clientele. Marcus Carter, the junior flight attendant, organized meal carts with nervous efficiency. Fresh from training, he still felt intimidated by Jennifer's seniority and sharp criticism of any mistakes. The galley smelled of reheated beef Wellington and fresh coffee, aromas that would soon take on bitter associations. Captain Sarah Morrison completed her pre-flight checklist in the cockpit. 25 years of military and commercial flying had taught her to focus on technical details rather than cabin politics. She trusted her crew to handle passenger services while she managed the complex systems that would carry 180 souls safely to their destination. Benjamin noticed the subtle dynamics as they boarded. How Jennifer's demeanor shifted when greeting different passengers. Her bright, "Welcome aboard," for a white woman with designer handbags. The cooler, "Please find your seats," for an elderly Latino gentleman. The complete silence as Benjamin and Maya approached. Maya noticed too, though she couldn't articulate what felt wrong. The pretty lady with the shiny name tag had looked right at her, then looked away quickly. Maya was used to adults smiling when they saw her. Teachers called her bright and polite. This felt different. The cabin's cream leather seats and polished wood accents projected luxury and exclusivity. Overhead bins accommodated expensive luggage while reading lights cast warm pools of illumination. Business class promised comfort, attention, and service, promises that would prove selectively honored. Benjamin stored their carry-on carefully, noting the emergency equipment locations with automatic precision. Maya settled into her window seat, pressing her nose against the small oval portal to watch baggage carts and fuel trucks moving below. "Daddy, why is that lady not saying hello to us?" Benjamin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd faced this situation countless times, in restaurants, hotels, government buildings where his clearance exceeded that of the people ignoring him. Some people are just busy, sweetheart. But his military training had taught him to assess threats and read situations. This wasn't random oversight. This was deliberate. And in 30 minutes, when Maya would ask for water for the third time, this careful ignore and exclude strategy would escalate into something much more serious. The engines began their low whir as the aircraft prepared for pushback. What should have been an exciting journey for a little girl visiting her grandmother was about to become a lesson in how prejudice operates in premium cabins 35,000 feet above ground. 30 minutes into the flight, Maya's small voice cut through the cabin hum. "Daddy, I'm really thirsty." Benjamin pressed the call button above their seats. The soft chime echoed in the business class cabin, but Jennifer Walsh continued organizing meal trays as if the sound came from empty air. 5 minutes passed. Benjamin pressed the button again. Jennifer glanced toward their row, her eyes scanning the area like she was looking for the source of an annoying noise, then returned to her tasks. The deliberate natures of her avoidance was becoming impossible to ignore. "Excuse me, Miss Walsh." Benjamin's voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Could my daughter get some water, please?" Jennifer froze for a split second, then continued walking past their row without acknowledging his words. Maya's confusion was written across her 8-year-old face as she watched the flight attendant serve the gentleman across the aisle a full glass of orange juice and warm nuts. "Sir, would you like wine with your meal?" Jennifer asked the white businessman in 12E, her voice suddenly warm and attentive. She leaned in close, her service smile bright and professional. "We have an excellent Chardonnay from Napa Valley." The contrast was jarring. Jennifer's enthusiastic service for the passenger literally 1 seat away from Benjamin made her complete dismissal of Maya impossible to misinterpret. Maya whispered to her father, "Why is she talking to that man but not us?" Benjamin's military training had taught him patience under pressure, but watching his daughter's confusion was testing every limit. "Sometimes people get busy, sweetheart." But this wasn't busy. This was systematic exclusion executed with practiced precision. Marcus Carter, the junior flight attendant, noticed the obvious pattern from the galley. He watched Jennifer serve champagne to passengers in rows 10, 11, 13, and 14, carefully skipping row 12 where Benjamin and Maya sat. When he started toward them with a water pitcher, Jennifer intercepted him with sharp efficiency. "I'll handle that section," she said firmly, then promptly ignored the section entirely. The pattern continued with brutal consistency. Jennifer distributed warm towels to every business class passenger except Benjamin and Maya. She offered newspapers and magazines to everyone except row 12. She provided pillows and blankets to all other passengers while walking past the father and daughter as if they were invisible furniture. 45 minutes passed. Maya's requests grew more desperate. "Daddy, my throat really hurts. Can you ask the lady again?" Dr. Elizabeth Hartman in 12A observed the situation with growing discomfort. As a pediatrician, she recognized a child's genuine distress. She also recognized discriminatory behavior when she saw it. The systematic, calculated nature of Jennifer's service pattern. Benjamin stood up, his 6-foot frame moving with controlled precision toward the galley. His military bearing was evident in every step, the straight spine, measured pace, and alert awareness that marked career officers. Jennifer saw him coming and immediately busied herself with paperwork, her back turned deliberately toward the cabin. She shuffled meaningless forms while humming softly, performing an elaborate charade of being too occupied to notice his approach. "Miss Walsh?" His voice remained steady but carried an edge that made other passengers look up from their magazines. "My daughter has been asking for water for nearly an hour. What exactly is the problem here?" Jennifer glanced over her shoulder with practiced indifference, her expression suggesting he was interrupting important work. "Sir, we're preparing meal service. Please return to your seat." "Meal service for everyone except row 12? Benjamin's question hung in the air like an accusation. Several passengers had received full drink service, warm towels, nuts, and meal selections. The discrimination was becoming undeniable to anyone paying attention. "Sir, I serve all passengers according to our schedule," Jennifer replied, her tone suggesting his question was unreasonable. Benjamin's response was measured but pointed. "Your schedule apparently has a very selective definition of all passengers." The comment drew nervous glances from nearby passengers who were beginning to recognize the obvious pattern of exclusion. Maya started crying quietly, overwhelmed by thirst, confusion, and the growing tension around her. The sound of a child in distress cut through the cabin's polite atmosphere like a knife. Her small shoulders shook as she tried to understand why the nice lady with the pretty uniform wouldn't help her. Dr. Hartman stood up, her medical authority evident in her commanding presence. "Excuse me, that little girl clearly needs water. She's been waiting over an hour while you've served everyone else." Jennifer's composure cracked slightly under professional scrutiny. "Ma'am, we have specific procedures for meal service timing. Your procedure is to ignore paying customers based on what criteria exactly, Doctor?" Hartman's voice carried the sharp precision of someone accustomed to challenging incompetence. "I'm a physician, and that child is showing signs of dehydration." The businessman in 12E, Robert Manning, lowered his Wall Street Journal with obvious irritation. He'd been watching the situation unfold while trying to focus on stock reports. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I've seen you serve everyone in this cabin except this family. What's your explanation?" Jennifer's face flushed as she realized multiple passengers were now openly challenging her behavior. Being questioned publicly threatened her carefully maintained authority and exposed her actions to scrutiny she'd hoped to avoid. "I serve passengers according to our established flight protocols," she replied defensively. "Which protocol requires ignoring an 8-year-old asking for water?" Benjamin's question was delivered with the precision of a military briefing. His calm demeanor made Jennifer's flustered behavior look even more unreasonable by comparison. A younger passenger in row 14 pulled out her phone, recognizing a potentially viral moment unfolding. The camera captured Jennifer's obvious discomfort as she realized her discrimination was being documented for potential social media exposure. Jennifer noticed the recording and her anxiety spiked. "Ma'am, please put your phone away. This is inappropriate." "What's inappropriate is a child being ignored for over an hour," the young woman replied, continuing to film. "Miss, I just want some water," Maya said directly to Jennifer, her voice small but perfectly clear. The innocence and politeness in her request made Jennifer's continued refusal seem not just unreasonable, but actively cruel. Jennifer's solution was to walk away entirely, retreating to the front galley where she pretended to check inventory with exaggerated focus. Her complete abandonment of the situation confirmed that her behavior was intentional rather than accidental oversight. Marcus Carter couldn't watch the discrimination continue. He approached Benjamin with genuine concern and professional embarrassment. "Sir, I'm so incredibly sorry about this. Let me get your daughter some water right away." "Marcus!" Jennifer's sharp voice cracked across the cabin like a whip. "I explicitly told you that I handle that section." "But you're not handling it," Marcus replied, his usually quiet voice finding unexpected strength. "They're paying customers with the same rights as everyone else on this aircraft." The confrontation between crew members drew every passenger's attention. Business class cabins weren't supposed to feature public arguments between staff members, especially arguments over basic service for a thirsty child. Jennifer marched back with determined aggression, her professional facade completely abandoned. "Marcus, step aside immediately. I'll decide when, how, and if I serve my assigned passengers." "Your assigned passengers?" Dr. Hartman's voice rose with medical authority. "They're human beings with basic needs, not assignments you can choose to ignore based on personal prejudice." The word prejudice hung in the recycled cabin air like an electric charge. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that the situation had moved beyond simple poor service into something much more serious. Benjamin maintained his position near the galley, his presence forcing Jennifer to either acknowledge him or continue revealing her prejudice to the entire cabin. His military bearing, straight posture, steady gaze, calm authority under pressure, made her flustered, defensive behavior appear increasingly unreasonable. "Sir, I'm ordering you to return to your seat immediately," Jennifer demanded, her voice tight with barely controlled irritation. "After my daughter receives the water she's been politely requesting for over an hour." Benjamin's response was simple, reasonable, and impossible to argue against from any logical standpoint. Maya had stopped crying, but her eyes remained wide with confusion and hurt. She'd never experienced such obvious, systematic rejection from an adult. In her 8-year-old understanding of the world, grown-ups helped children, especially when they asked politely and said please. James Peterson, the businessman in 12G, closed his laptop with obvious frustration. "I've flown business class on hundreds of flights, and I've never witnessed service this deliberately selective." The word selective carried obvious implications that made several passengers nod in uncomfortable recognition. Jennifer realized she was trapped in a situation of her own making. Continuing to refuse service would confirm the discrimination allegations now being openly discussed. But providing service at this point would essentially admit her previous behavior was wrong and potentially actionable. Her solution was deflection and intimidation. "Sir, if you continue to disrupt this flight and interfere with crew operations, we'll be forced to report you to federal authorities when we land." The threat was absurd. A father politely requesting water for his thirsty child could hardly be characterized as disruptive behavior. But it revealed Jennifer's willingness to escalate rather than simply perform basic job duties. Benjamin's response carried quiet authority that made the entire cabin pause. "Miss Walsh, I strongly suggest you consider very carefully what you say next." Something in his tone, not anger or frustration, but the unmistakable voice of someone who understood exactly how these situations worked and their potential consequences, made Jennifer hesitate for the first time. Hartman stood up again, her medical authority adding unmistakable weight to the confrontation. "I'm formally requesting that you provide immediate basic service to these passengers." The cabin atmosphere grew thick with tension. Several passengers had stopped pretending to read, openly watching the discrimination unfold in real time. The hum of aircraft engines seemed quieter against the charged silence. Maya looked up at her father with complete trust, even as she struggled to understand why the pretty lady with the shiny name tag had become so mean. Her innocence in the face of such obvious prejudice made Jennifer's behavior seem increasingly monstrous. "Ma'am, please don't interfere with crew operations," Jennifer snapped at Dr. Hartman, her composure cracking further under public scrutiny. "Crew operations?" Dr. Hartman's voice rose with professional indignation. "You mean the operation of systematically ignoring paying customers based on their race?" The word race cut through the cabin like a blade. Jennifer's face flushed deep red as she realized the discrimination was now being called out explicitly. "That's a very serious accusation," Jennifer replied, her voice trembling with defensive anger. "I serve all passengers equally." "Then serve them," Benjamin said quietly, his calm voice contrasting sharply with Jennifer's agitation. But Jennifer had passed the point of rational de-escalation. Instead of simply getting Maya water, she doubled down on her position with increasing hostility. "Sir, I don't appreciate your attitude or your implications," Jennifer declared loudly enough for the entire business class section to hear. "Some passengers seem to think they're entitled to special treatment." The irony was staggering. Benjamin and Maya weren't asking for special treatment. They were asking for the same treatment every other passenger had received. Marcus Carter stepped forward with visible frustration. "Jennifer, just give the kid some water. This is getting out of hand." "Don't you dare tell me how to do my job," Jennifer hissed. "I've been flying these routes for 8 years. I know exactly what kind of passengers belong in business class and which ones are probably here on some kind of charity upgrade." The racist implication hung in the recycled air like poison gas. Several passengers gasped audibly. The young woman recording raised her phone higher, ensuring she captured every word. Maya tugged on her father's sleeve, her voice small and confused. "Daddy, what's a charity upgrade? Are we not supposed to be here?" Benjamin's jaw tightened as he knelt beside his daughter. "Sweetheart, we belong wherever we have tickets to be. Don't let anyone tell you different." But the damage was done. Maya's excitement about flying in the nice seats had transformed into shame and confusion about whether they deserved to be there. Robert Manning, the businessman in 12E, stood up with corporate authority. "Ma'am, I run a Fortune 500 company, and if any of my employees spoke to customers like this, they'd be terminated immediately." Jennifer's response revealed the depth of her prejudice. "Sir, I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining certain standards in premium cabins." "Standards?" Manning's voice carried the sharp edge of a CEO who'd just heard something unacceptable. "What standards are you referring to exactly?" Jennifer realized she'd stepped into dangerous territory, but couldn't stop herself from digging deeper. "Well, business class passengers typically have a certain profile. Education, income level, professional background. It's important to maintain the right atmosphere for our valued customers." Dr. Hartman laughed bitterly. "The right atmosphere? You mean whites only?" "I never said that," Jennifer protested, but her meaning was crystal clear to everyone listening. The young passenger recording spoke up. "Actually, you kind of did. This is all being live-streamed right now." Jennifer's face went pale as she realized her discriminatory comments were being broadcast in real time to potentially thousands of viewers. "Turn that off immediately." "Free speech," the young woman replied calmly. "Public space. Public behavior." James Peterson closed his newspaper entirely, his patience exhausted. "Miss, I've watched you serve champagne, nuts, and warm towels to every passenger in this section except this family. Then you suggested they don't belong here because of their profile. What exactly do you think we're all witnessing?" Jennifer's panic was becoming obvious. She'd expected passive compliance or quiet resentment, not organized resistance from multiple passengers. "You're all misunderstanding the situation." "Then explain it," Benjamin said calmly. "Help us understand why my daughter can't get water." Instead of backing down, Jennifer made her worst mistake yet. She looked directly at Maya and spoke with cold deliberation. "Little girl, sometimes when people can't afford the nice seats, they get upset when they don't get extra attention." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "But Daddy said we could afford it. Daddy saved money for months." The cruelty of targeting a child directly shocked even the passengers who had been trying to stay neutral. A collective intake of breath swept through the cabin. Benjamin stood slowly, his military training keeping his movements controlled despite the rage building inside him. "Miss Walsh, you just made this very, very personal." Something in his tone, quiet, measured but carrying unmistakable authority, made Jennifer take a step backward. For the first time, she seemed to recognize she might have misjudged her target. Dr. Hartman pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the airline's customer service line right now. This is beyond unacceptable." "Ma'am, please don't make unnecessary calls," Jennifer pleaded, her bravado crumbling. Unnecessary, Dr. Hartman's voice rose. You just told an 8-year-old she doesn't belong here because of her skin color. I'm not just calling customer service. I'm filing a federal discrimination complaint. Marcus Carter looked stricken. Jennifer, what are you doing? These are good people. Just apologize and get them some water. Don't tell me what to do, Jennifer snapped. And don't lecture me about good people. I can spot trouble when I see it. Trouble? Benjamin asked quietly. What trouble do you see, Miss Walsh? Please be specific. Jennifer realized she'd painted herself into a corner. She couldn't articulate what trouble a well-dressed father and his polite daughter represented without revealing her racial prejudice explicitly. Sir, I don't have to explain my professional judgment to you, she replied defensively. The businessman in 12G laughed harshly. Professional judgment? Is that what we're calling racism now? Maya had started crying again, overwhelmed by the hostile atmosphere and her growing understanding that the pretty lady disliked her for reasons she couldn't comprehend. Daddy, I want to go home, Maya whispered. I don't like it here anymore. Hearing his daughter's distress broke Benjamin's careful composure. Miss Walsh, you've just reduced my 8-year-old daughter to tears because you can't do your job without bringing your personal prejudices into it. I don't have prejudices, Jennifer protested, but her defense sounded hollow after her previous comments. Then prove it, Dr. Hartman challenged. Get that child some water right now. Jennifer stood frozen, unable to move forward or backward. Providing service now would feel like admitting wrongdoing, but continuing to refuse would confirm everything the passengers suspected about her motives. Her solution was to escalate rather than capitulate. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and stop disrupting other passengers' flights. He's not disrupting anything, Manning said firmly. You are. Your behavior is the disruption. The recording passenger's live stream was gaining viewers rapidly. Comments poured in expressing outrage at Jennifer's treatment of Maya. Hashtags like #airline discrimination and #racist flight attendant began trending. People are furious about this, the young woman announced. Thousands of people are watching this happen right now. Jennifer's panic reached a new level. Please stop recording. This is being taken out of context. What context makes refusing water to a child acceptable? Dr. Hartman demanded. Benjamin checked his vintage pilot watch, a movement that caught Jennifer's attention. Something about the timepiece seemed familiar, but she couldn't place why. Miss Walsh, Benjamin said with final clarity, I'm formally requesting to speak with Captain Morrison immediately. Jennifer's face went white. Involving the captain would mean official reports, witness statements, and documentation of her behavior. Sir, the captain is busy with flight operations. Then get me the first officer or flight engineer, Benjamin replied. This situation requires immediate attention from flight deck personnel. Marcus Carter stepped forward decisively. I'll call the cockpit myself. This has gone way too far. Marcus, don't you dare, Jennifer began. Ma'am, I'm not watching a child suffer because of your issues, Marcus replied firmly. He reached for the interphone connecting to the flight deck. Jennifer grabbed his arm. Don't involve the captain in passenger complaints. This isn't a complaint anymore, Marcus said, shaking off her grip. This is discrimination, and Captain Morrison needs to know what's happening in her cabin. The interphone crackled to life. Cockpit! Captain Morrison, this is Marcus. We need you in the cabin immediately. We have a serious situation involving passenger services and potential civil rights violations. A pause. I'll be right down. Jennifer's world began collapsing around her. In minutes, her behavior would be reviewed by a captain known for taking passenger rights seriously. Her 8-year career, her authority, her carefully maintained position, all threatened by her inability to simply treat a black family with basic human dignity. Maya looked up at her father through tears. Is the captain going to help us, Daddy? Benjamin's smile was gentle, but his eyes carried something harder. Yes, sweetheart. The captain is definitely going to help us. The cockpit door opened with a mechanical click that silenced the entire cabin. Captain Sarah Morrison stepped into the business class section, her uniform crisp and authoritative, 25 years of flying experience evident in her confident stride. She surveyed the tense scene, Jennifer standing defensively near the galley, Marcus holding the interphone, passengers openly staring, and Maya crying quietly in her father's arms. Her pilot's eyes, trained to assess situations quickly, took in every detail. "What seems to be the problem here?" Captain Morrison asked, her voice carrying the calm authority that commanded respect in cockpits worldwide. Jennifer immediately launched into damage control. "Captain, we have a passenger who's been disrupting service and making unreasonable demands." Morrison held up her hand for silence, her attention drawn to the man standing protectively beside the window seat. Something about his posture, his bearing, the way he held himself under pressure seemed familiar. Then her eyes fell on his vintage Omega Speedmaster pilot's watch. Captain Morrison's face went through a rapid transformation, confusion, recognition, then complete shock. Her professional composure cracked as her eyes widened in disbelief. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping closer. "Benjamin? Colonel Benjamin Cole?" The cabin fell dead silent. Every conversation stopped. Every passenger turned to stare. Benjamin straightened to his full height, and suddenly his military bearing was unmistakable. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a while." Captain Morrison's voice trembled with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the stunned cabin, "you are looking at Colonel Benjamin Cole, United States Air Force, the youngest African-American pilot to command a fighter squadron in Air Force history." Jennifer's face drained of all color as the magnitude of her mistake hit her like a physical blow. Morrison continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Colonel Cole is also the most decorated test pilot of his generation. He flew experimental aircraft that most pilots wouldn't dare touch. He commanded rescue missions in Afghanistan that saved hundreds of lives." Maya looked up at her father with wide eyes, suddenly understanding why the captain seemed so excited to see him. "But more than that," Morrison's voice cracked with emotion, "Colonel Cole saved my life when my helicopter went down in hostile territory near Kandahar. He disobeyed direct orders to fly into enemy fire and pull my crew out of a crash site." The cabin was so quiet you could hear the aircraft's climate control system cycling. Morrison turned to address the passengers directly. 8 years ago then, Major Cole flew a damaged rescue helicopter through enemy fire for 47 minutes to extract my crew. He took shrapnel in his shoulder and kept flying. 3 of us are alive today because this man refused to leave us behind. Benjamin's response was characteristically humble. "Sarah, that was our job. Any pilot would have done the same." "No, sir, they wouldn't have," Morrison replied firmly. "The area was declared too hot for rescue. Command ordered all aircraft to abort. You came anyway." She turned back to the cabin, her voice carrying the conviction of someone sharing absolute truth. "Colonel Cole received the Distinguished Flying Cross for that mission, but that's just one of 17 major decorations in his file." Maya tugged on her father's sleeve, her voice filled with awe. "Daddy, you're a hero?" Benjamin knelt beside his daughter, his voice gentle. "I'm just a pilot who did his job, sweetheart. The real heroes are the people we helped." Morrison wasn't finished. "Colonel Cole also holds advanced degrees in aeronautical engineering and aviation safety. He's consulted on aircraft design for Boeing and Lockheed Martin. He's literally written the textbooks on emergency flight procedures that we study today." The interphone crackled to life. "Captain, this is First Officer Wright. Is everything okay down there?" Morrison keyed the mic. "James, please come to the cabin. Bring Mike with you." Within moments, First Officer James Wright and Flight Engineer Michael Torres emerged from the cockpit. When they saw Benjamin, their reactions were immediate and unmistakable. "Sir!" First Officer Wright snapped to attention with a crisp salute. "Colonel Cole, it's an honor, sir. I studied your emergency landing procedures at the academy." Flight Engineer Torres stepped forward with obvious respect. Colonel, your innovations in systems redundancy are still standard protocol. Sir, it's truly an honor to meet you. Benjamin returned their salutes with practiced precision, then immediately put them at ease. Gentlemen, I'm flying as a civilian today with my daughter. But the damage to Jennifer's position was complete and irreversible. She stood frozen, realizing she'd spent 2 hours systematically discriminating against one of the most respected pilots in modern aviation history. Dr. Hartman started laughing, not with humor but with amazed disbelief. You've been treating a distinguished Flying Cross recipient like he was invisible? The passenger who'd been recording looked directly into her camera. People, you're not going to believe this. The man this flight attendant has been refusing to serve water. He's literally a decorated war hero. Maya beamed with newfound pride, finally understanding why her daddy sometimes seemed different from other fathers. Daddy flies the fast planes that help people. Morrison's voice carried steel as she turned to Jennifer. Miss Walsh, you've just spent 2 hours discriminating against a man who's risked his life repeatedly for this country. A man whose expertise in aviation safety exceeds that of most airline management. Jennifer tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. I had no idea. Colonel, I'm so sorry. Benjamin's response showed the grace that had made him a respected leader. Miss Walsh, the problem isn't that you didn't know who I am. The problem is that you treated a father and his 8-year-old daughter with disrespect based solely on the color of our skin. Morrison nodded approvingly. Exactly right, sir. Rank and service record shouldn't matter. Every passenger deserves basic human dignity. The power dynamic had completely flipped. Jennifer, who minutes earlier had been wielding petty authority to humiliate Benjamin and Maya, now stood utterly powerless before a man whose actual authority and accomplishments dwarfed anything she could imagine. Maya looked around the cabin at all the adults showing her daddy such respect. Daddy? Does this mean we can get some water now? The entire cabin erupted in laughter, the tension finally breaking as everyone recognized the absurd simplicity of what this had always been about. A thirsty child asking for basic service. Captain Morrison's expression hardened as she processed the full scope of what had transpired in her cabin. Miss Walsh, you're relieved of duty effective immediately. Jennifer's face crumpled. Captain, please, I didn't know he was... Stop right there, Morrison cut her off sharply. You didn't know he was what? Important enough to deserve basic human decency? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Jennifer had no answer that wouldn't further condemn her. Benjamin stood up, still holding Maya's hand. Captain Morrison, my daughter would still like that water she asked for 2 hours ago. Of course, sir. Morrison personally retrieved a bottle of premium water and knelt to Maya's level. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry about how you were treated on my aircraft. Maya accepted the water gratefully. Thank you. Why was that lady so mean to us? Morrison's jaw tightened as she struggled to explain adult prejudice to an 8-year-old. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices, honey. But we're going to make sure it never happens again. First Officer Wright approached Jennifer with grim professionalism. Ma'am, I need your crew badge and airline identification immediately. Jennifer's hands shook as she removed her nameplate and company ID. 8 years of seniority, benefits, and career advancement dissolved in seconds. Please, this is all a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Dr. Hartman interjected, was your assumption that you could treat passengers differently based on race without consequences. Flight Engineer Torres was already on the radio with airline headquarters. Operations, this is Flight 892. We have a Code 7 passenger services violation requiring immediate management attention upon arrival. Marcus Carter approached Benjamin with genuine remorse. Sir, I should have intervened sooner. I knew what she was doing was wrong. Benjamin's response was gracious. Marcus, you did speak up when it mattered. That took courage. Morrison keyed her radio. "Ground control, this is Captain Morrison. Please have airline management and legal representatives standing by at gate C-14. We have a serious incident requiring immediate attention." Jennifer made one final desperate attempt. "Colonel Cole, surely we can resolve this quietly. I've learned my lesson." Benjamin's response was measured but firm. "Miss Walsh, this isn't about punishment. It's about ensuring no other family experiences what we did today." The young passenger recording addressed her live stream audience. "This flight attendant just got fired for discriminating against a decorated war hero. Justice served in real time, people." Her viewer count had exploded to over 50,000 people watching the aftermath unfold. Comments poured in expressing satisfaction at Jennifer's swift consequences. Dr. Hartman pulled out her business card. "Colonel, I'm documenting everything I witnessed today. This behavior was systematic and deliberate." Robert Manning, the businessman, added his support. "Sir, I run a major corporation. I'll gladly provide a statement about what I observed. This was textbook discrimination." Morrison addressed the entire cabin with command authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize on behalf of our airline. The behavior you witnessed does not represent our values or standards." Several passengers applauded, creating an atmosphere of collective support for Benjamin and Maya. Jennifer gathered her personal items with tears streaming down her face. Her confident authority had evaporated, replaced by the reality of unemployment and potential legal consequences. Maya tugged on her father's uniform sleeve. "Daddy, why is the lady crying now?" Benjamin knelt beside his daughter. "Sometimes when people do wrong things, they feel sad when they realize their mistakes have consequences." Morrison coordinated with ground operations. "We'll need airport security standing by. Miss Walsh will be escorted off the aircraft first and turned over to airline management for immediate termination proceedings." Marcus Carter was officially promoted on the spot. "Marcus, you're now acting chief flight attendant for the remainder of this flight. Your integrity today was exemplary." The cabin atmosphere had completely transformed. Passengers who earlier seemed uncomfortable now openly expressed support for Benjamin and Maya. "Sir, thank you for your service," called out James Peterson from row 12G. "Colonel, my son is in the Air Force. You're exactly the kind of leader he looks up to," added another passenger. Maya beamed with pride as she finally understood why everyone was treating her daddy with such respect. Jennifer was escorted to the front of the aircraft by Morrison personally. "Miss Walsh, you'll be met by security and management. Your employment is terminated, and you'll face a full investigation by both the airline and federal authorities." As Jennifer disappeared toward the exit, the cabin erupted in spontaneous applause. Justice had been swift, decisive, and completely satisfying. Maya clapped along enthusiastically. "Daddy, everyone is happy now." Benjamin smiled, finally relaxing as the immediate crisis passed. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes standing up for what's right makes everyone happy." The flight could finally continue with dignity restored and prejudice decisively defeated. Within 12 hours of Flight 892's landing, the story had exploded across national media. The recorded footage of Jennifer Walsh's discrimination against a decorated war hero became the most watched airline incident video in social media history. CNN's breaking news banner read, "Decorated Air Force Colonel discriminated against on flight." The video had been viewed over 10 million times, with comments expressing outrage at Jennifer's behavior and admiration for Benjamin's grace under pressure. The Department of Transportation launched an immediate federal civil rights investigation. Lead investigator Angela Rodriguez arrived at the airline's headquarters within 24 hours, armed with witness statements, video evidence, and a mandate to examine systemic discrimination practices. "This case represents a clear violation of federal aviation civil rights regulations," Rodriguez announced at a press conference. "We're investigating not just this incident, but patterns of discriminatory behavior throughout the airline industry." Jennifer Walsh's termination was just the beginning of her consequences. Within 48 hours, she faced federal civil rights charges carrying potential prison time and lifetime bans from aviation employment. Her discriminatory comments, captured on video and witnessed by multiple passengers, provided ironclad evidence of intentional racial bias. The airline's legal team scrambled to contain the damage. CEO Michael Harrison personally called Benjamin to apologize and offer comprehensive compensation. Colonel Cole, what happened on Flight 892 is antithetical to everything we claim to stand for as a company. Benjamin's response was characteristically focused on systemic change rather than personal gain. Mr. Harrison, I don't want money. I want guarantees that no family will ever experience what my daughter and I endured. Congressional attention came swiftly. Representative David Washington, chairman of the House Transportation Committee, announced immediate hearings on airline discrimination. Colonel Cole's experience represents the tip of an iceberg. We're going to examine how pervasive these practices are throughout commercial aviation. The airline industry faced a public relations catastrophe. Other carriers proactively reviewed their policies, desperate to avoid similar incidents. Stock prices for major airlines dropped as investors recognized the potential for widespread litigation and regulatory changes. Benjamin was invited to testify before Congress, where his calm, professional demeanor provided a stark contrast to the ugly discrimination he'd experienced. Members of Congress, this isn't about my military service or decorations. This is about fundamental human dignity for all passengers. His testimony was watched by over 20 million Americans. Maya sat in the gallery, watching her father address the nation's lawmakers with the same quiet authority she'd always known but was only beginning to understand. My 8-year-old daughter asked me why the flight attendant wouldn't give her water, Benjamin continued. How do you explain to a child that some adults judge people by skin color rather than character? The hearing room was completely silent as Benjamin's words carried the weight of both personal experience and national conscience. Expert testimony followed from civil rights attorneys, aviation safety specialists, and discrimination researchers. Dr. Patricia Johnson, a leading civil rights lawyer, testified about the broader implications. Colonel Cole's case demonstrates how discrimination operates in premium service environments, Dr. Johnson explained. The perpetrator felt entitled to exclude passengers she deemed unworthy of business-class service based purely on racial assumptions. Now, the video evidence was played repeatedly during the hearings, with Jennifer's racist comments about charity upgrades and passenger profiles serving as textbook examples of discriminatory mindset. Federal prosecutors filed formal charges against Jennifer Walsh under the Civil Rights Act. She faced up to 3 years in federal prison and $50,000 in fines for willful discrimination in public accommodation services. Jennifer's defense attorney attempted to portray her actions as poor judgment rather than racial bias, but the video evidence was devastating. Her comments about passenger profiles and standards left no room for alternative interpretation. The trial became a national spectacle. Benjamin's testimony was dignified and powerful, focusing on the impact on Maya rather than his own mistreatment. She asked me if we didn't belong there. An 8-year-old child questioned her own worth because of an adult's prejudice. Dr. Hartman, Marcus Carter, and multiple passengers testified about the systematic nature of Jennifer's discrimination. The prosecution built an airtight case demonstrating intentional, prolonged racist behavior. Jennifer's sentencing hearing drew national attention. Federal Judge Maria Santos delivered a scathing rebuke along with the maximum penalty: 3 years in federal prison, $50,000 in fines, and lifetime prohibition from employment in any federally regulated transportation industry. Ms. Walsh, Judge Santos stated, you systematically denied basic human dignity to a family based solely on racial prejudice. Your actions violated federal law and fundamental American values. The airline faced massive institutional changes mandated by federal regulators. The Department of Transportation imposed unprecedented requirements. mandatory bias training for all employees, federal monitoring of service complaints, and zero-tolerance policies with automatic termination for discriminatory behavior. Congress passed the Aviation Passenger Dignity Act within 6 months, establishing federal oversight of airline discrimination complaints and requiring annual bias training certification for all airline personnel. The legislation included provisions named after Maya, the Children's Civil Rights Protection Clause, ensuring that discrimination affecting minors would face enhanced penalties and mandatory federal investigation. Benjamin established the Invisible Passengers Foundation, funded by airline settlements and public donations, to support victims of transportation discrimination and provide bias training resources industry-wide. The foundation's first initiative was a children's program teaching young people about civil rights and dignity. Maya became the program's youngest advocate, speaking to elementary school classes about standing up for fairness. International attention followed, with airlines in Europe, Asia, and Australia implementing similar anti-discrimination protocols based on Benjamin's case. The incident became a global catalyst for aviation industry reform. Marcus Carter, promoted to regional training director, developed new service protocols emphasizing equal treatment regardless of passenger background. His program became the industry standard for bias prevention training. Captain Morrison was promoted to Chief of Flight Operations and spearheaded the airline's new Dignity in Flight program, ensuring all crew members understood that discrimination would result in immediate termination and federal prosecution. Airlines reported a 70% decrease in discrimination complaints within 1 year of the new policies. Customer satisfaction among minority passengers increased dramatically as the industry acknowledged that equal treatment wasn't optional. Jennifer Walsh served her full sentence in federal prison, becoming a cautionary example of how personal prejudice could destroy careers and freedom. Her case was studied in law schools as a perfect example of swift civil rights justice. Benjamin's advocacy extended beyond aviation. He consulted with hotels, restaurants, and retail chains on bias prevention, using his experience to help other industries recognize and eliminate discriminatory practices. The ripple effects continued expanding as Benjamin's story inspired similar accountability in other service industries. His quiet dignity in the face of discrimination had catalyzed nationwide change. Maya, now understanding the full significance of that day, often told her classmates, "My daddy showed everyone that being different doesn't mean being less important." The case established permanent legal precedent that discrimination in premium services carried the same federal penalties as any other civil rights violation, ending the fiction that higher-priced services could operate with different standards of human dignity. 18 months after Flight 892, Benjamin Cole stood in his office overlooking Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. His title read, Director of Aviation Civil Rights Compliance, a position created specifically to prevent future discrimination incidents throughout the federal aviation system. On his desk sat a framed photo of Maya presenting her award-winning essay, Why Everyone Deserves Dignity, to her 4th grade class. She'd become the youngest advocate ever recognized by the NAACP for her work promoting equality education in elementary schools. The airline that once discriminated against them had been transformed into an industry leader in inclusive service. Their Equal Skies initiative was now the gold standard for civil rights compliance, studied and implemented by carriers worldwide. Maya burst into his office after school, her backpack covered with airplane pins from different airlines, gifts from pilots who'd heard their story. "Daddy, guess what? Ms. Rodriguez wants me to speak at the high school about standing up for what's right." Benjamin smiled, remembering his 8-year-old daughter crying in seat 12F, confused by adult cruelty she couldn't understand. Now 9, Maya had become a confident advocate who understood that her experience could help others. "Are you ready for that kind of responsibility, sweetheart? You taught me that when bad things happen, we can make them into good things for other people," Maya replied with the wisdom that still amazed him. Captain Sarah Morrison stopped by their office monthly, bringing updates on the aviation industry's continued progress. Discrimination complaints had dropped 85% across all major carriers as the Benjamin Cole Protocol became standard training for flight crews worldwide. Marcus Carter, now Regional Director of Customer Experience, had revolutionized service training throughout the industry. His programs emphasized that excellent service meant treating every passenger with equal dignity, regardless of their appearance or assumptions about their background. Jennifer Walsh had been released from federal prison after serving her full sentence. She now worked for a non-profit organization teaching bias awareness, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about how prejudice destroys both its victims and perpetrators. Her mandated community service included speaking to aviation workers about the consequences of discrimination. "I lost my career, my freedom, and my reputation because I couldn't see past skin color to recognize human dignity," she told audiences with genuine remorse. The congressional legislation triggered by their incident had expanded beyond aviation. The Dignity in Service Act now covered all federally regulated transportation, requiring bias training and zero-tolerance policies for discrimination in buses, trains, airports, and taxi services. Benjamin often reflected on how one moment of standing up for his daughter had catalyzed nationwide change. "Maya asked for water, and we ended up transforming an industry," he would tell audiences during speaking engagements. The Invisible Passengers Foundation had helped over 2,000 discrimination victims obtain justice and compensation. More importantly, their education programs had trained over 50,000 service workers in bias recognition and prevention. Maya's favorite part of their story was visiting schools to teach children about equality. "Everyone deserves to be seen and treated nicely," she would tell kindergartners. "It doesn't matter what color you are or what clothes you wear, Doctor." Elizabeth Hartman remained close to their family, often joining Benjamin at medical conferences where he spoke about the health impacts of discrimination stress on children. Their work had influenced pediatric guidelines for recognizing and treating discrimination trauma. The young passenger whose live stream had documented Jennifer's behavior became a civil rights journalism major, inspired by how social media could expose injustice and drive accountability. Her footage remained the most watched discrimination incident video in internet history. Benjamin's final reflection on their experience always returned to the same theme. "That day on Flight 892, Maya taught me something important. When she asked why the lady wouldn't help us, she wasn't asking about race or prejudice, concepts she didn't understand yet. She was asking about basic human kindness. Here's what I learned. You don't have to be a decorated military officer to deserve dignity. You don't have to achieve anything special to be worthy of respect. The only qualification for being treated as a human being is being human." Change doesn't always require anger or confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand quietly and remind people of their humanity. Maya's simple request for water became a reminder that every person, regardless of age, race, or status, deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that everyone deserves dignity. Subscribe for more stories proving that standing up for what's right can create change that lasts for generations. Ring that notification bell because justice stories like this one prove that ordinary people can create extraordinary transformation. Tell me in the comments, when you witness discrimination, will you speak up? Your voice could be the one that changes everything. Maya was 8 when she asked for water and accidentally changed an industry. What change will you create today?